Epicenter is upon us and looks, for all intents and purposes, like it will be one of the events of the year. And on esports pools, we have an exclusive fantasy pool that's got my name attached to it, Thorin's the Epicenter fantasy pool. It's free to enter, and as usual, the first prize, second prize, third prize, the prizes are all skins. So as long as you enter, well, I don't know when the cutoff point is, but you can still enter at this point today and sometime tomorrow. I think maybe it stops maybe tomorrow early in the morning. So you have to go ahead and enter soon, but it's free to enter anyway. You don't lose anything for entering, and you can obviously win skins. Now, Epicenter does look to me like it could be a contender for event of the year. I know it's always tough to beat out the majors because they have such a bigger field, and the qualification method means that in theory every top team could make it there. But you look at the format and the teams at Epicenter, and it's looking very scary. Now, first of all, some of the field is contingent on the two wildcard matches, because there are these two matches where the playoffs, where there's 4 teams, there's 2 matches they play, 2 of the teams will make it into the main tournament and 2 won't. Now, the 2 favourite teams to make it in through the wildcard system are Team Liquid, obviously a team that's had a couple of finals recently, and FaZe, who've been in a couple of finals and won a couple of finals and won 2 events undefeated. So if those teams get in, as on paper they should, then we will have a really strong lineup of teams here, because of the 8 teams that will be in the main tournament, if Team Liquid and FaZe can get in, that would mean that literally my top 7 from my world ranking would be in this tournament. So that would make it one of the most stacked tournaments of the year. And when you think about it, top 7 teams in the world in a group stage system which has 8 teams, that's going to lead to some mega fucking stacked groups. And that's what you got to talk about first, is the format, because once you get to the main tournament, you have the 2 teams come in from the wildcard matches and go into a group each. And then you have 2 groups of 4, GSL style. But here's the key difference. Just as I've advocated in past videos, all the matches are best of 3. Now, I normally have to try and wrangle with people who are making the invites for these tournaments, like, oh, well, if you can only do a couple of best of 3s, make one the winners match and then make one the decider match. And then other people are like, no, the lower bracket match should be a best of 3, so you can never go out after playing 2 maps, right? I get all that, but in an ideal world, for me, the best events, especially majors and hopefully big tier 1 events, if they do GSL system, I would like them to do all the matches best of 3, so that when you have stacked groups, it's really tough to get out, but the best teams get out, and you have lots of quality play, and it's not just one map, especially because the best of 1 system means you go sort of usually towards the middle of the map pool, and so it makes it less interesting. Best of 3 means you're getting to pick strong maps each, and then you have the decider that's kind of the middle of the group match, and you get a chance to just 2-0 someone on a strong map they're on and show how dominant you are, not just go to the decider and win on the middle-ish map, or get upset on the middle-ish map. Now, I love this format. It's one of my favorites. And so already this sets the table, along with the strong teams that are there currently and could be there if the 2 wildcard teams get in, where I actually think this, combined with the number of good teams, sets up a really good chance to have lots of amazing matches and have a very strong tournament. So this is one of the factors that makes it a contender for tournament of the year, or at least when it all plays out, it could be. So I love this format. It's also interesting that they've changed up from last year, because remember, last year was 4 groups of 4. They didn't have the wild card set up, and what they did was you just played best of 2. So you played 2 maps, and then if you remember, in Group A, famously, the one that was like Na'Vi, G2, NiP, and who else was it in Group A? Na'Vi, NiP, Dignitas. In that group, that was the one where we ended up in a bizarre scenario where everyone just tied all the matches. And so NiP went out of the tournament, even though they'd lost and won the same exact number of maps as everyone else in the group. Now, that was clearly a flawed format. I'm glad they changed it up there. I don't think that had any place in an offline tournament. I don't mind if you do that as an online league and you have that as the format. Great. Offline, probably not. So best of 3 is, in my opinion, the ideal solution for GSL. So now let's look at the groups. Group A is SK Gaming, still the number 1 ranked team, Virtus.pro, Gambit, and then a wildcard team who we can't know who it will be yet. Because first of all, we don't know who will win the matches. And then secondly, we don't actually know which team the wildcard's going to. I assume they're randomly drawn. So an interesting detail about this group, SK, Virtus.pro, Gambit, and then a wildcard, is if Team Liquid were to win their wildcard match against Vega Squadron and be put into this group, then we would yet again see Team Liquid potentially playing SK and Virtus.pro. Obviously, Team Liquid played SK at the last 3 tournaments. They played them at Mykonos, they played them at ESL New York, and they played them at E-League, and they won the first 2 and they lost the last one. And they played Virtus.pro at ESL New York in the group stage. So if that was to happen, that's an interesting storyline. And at the moment, Team Liquid seems to be one of those teams, kind of like G2 always getting drawn with Envious. They seem to always get these same group draws where they get teams like SK over and over again. Group B is Astralis, still a highly ranked team, finalists of E-League Premier. G2, who won Malmo, but then dropped off heavily when he came to E-League Premier, but I think it's an ESL Premier. E-League Premier, where they lost to Cloud9. We have North, who obviously have had some strong finishes. They're the team that have actually took FaZe the closest so far. They also were second place at Malmo, so they've been pretty good. And we have the Wildcard team. So here's another factor to think about here, okay? If you go ahead and you put FaZe into this group, it becomes one of the most insane groups of death I've ever seen. In my opinion, possibly more insane than that famous Group D from ESL 1 Cologne 2016, the one that was G2, Fnatic, SK, and then FaZe. Because actually at that point in time, that FaZe lineup never used to make playoffs. So they were a dangerous upset team, but they weren't likely to get out the group. So really it was only between the other three. And then since there was the best of three aspect, you know, it was more like SK was pretty sure, in my opinion, to get out. And it was more between G2 and Fnatic. In this group, if you really do add in FaZe here, legitimately, any two could get out of the group. I realize people are already going to say, wait a minute, surely it's FaZe and then another one of the other three. You say that, but when you potentially have to face two of the other three, FaZe could lose a series here. Sure, I'd still pick them to get out, but absolutely they could lose a series to these other teams. These are some of the teams, actually, that you'd pick as three of the most likely to be able to potentially beat FaZe. And it's all best of three. So the best of three aspect helps FaZe, but also means they might have to play more maps, they might have to play an opponent more than one time. This could be very, very interesting for FaZe, and this could be where they have their first slip-up, even though they are favourites to win the whole tournament. So obviously before we get to these groups and the hypotheticals, we have to talk about the wildcard scenario. So first of all, wildcard matches, there's two of them predetermined and they are best of threes. Now I like that as well. That's not a best of one. It's a full best of three series. So by the way, if either of these two underdog teams, so Tyloo who's playing FaZe or Vega who's playing Team Liquid, if either of them can win a best of three offline against those teams, absolutely, you should be in the tournament. You deserve to be. Yes, I'd rather have FaZe and Team Liquid in the tournament. I think they could do more. But if you can win a best of three against FaZe or Team Liquid, come into the tournament. You deserve it, and let's see how you can do. Probably not well, but hey, you earned that spot. So I love that as a wildcard system. I have to say, in terms of making the matches more competitive, I would have preferred we had the opposite pairings. Like, I'd rather it was FaZe against Vega Squadron, another European team, a team who's probably mainly played them online with bad ping, teams had the odd upset online. Yeah, I don't think Vega Squadron would get through, but I feel like that would be a better matchup. Although you could say certainly Vega Squadron have chances against Team Liquid. There's not as strong a team as FaZe. Tyloo versus Team Liquid I think would have been better anyway, because I think Tyloo actually could have pushed the series perhaps a little bit more because the maps would be favourable against them against Team Liquid. They could play a lot of those. I also feel like there's a surprise factor where Team Liquid couldn't really have prepped the same way for Team Liquid, where I don't think FaZe need to. I think they've just got so much firepower and such an insane strength in the map pools that they play. Some of them we haven't seen tested, but the ones that they've been strong on, they're just too good on those. And it feels like Tyloo, having not played FaZe online with this lineup, are just going to get brutalized. So I have to say, I think Tyloo can't... I think skill-wise, they have some decent players. But first of all, this adding Bondic thing in, that sounds like an experiment I don't think is going to work. He's going to have no communication with the rest of the team. The map pool doesn't help them because Tyloo in general want to play Mirage and Overpass. And those are two of the arguably the strongest maps for FaZe that they are undefeated on and wrecking everyone on. FaZe just beat Astralis on Overpass, the best Overpass team in the world. So I can't see where Tyloo can go. Tyloo, in theory, in the past, sometimes would push a series to cash. That's one they would go for. I can't really see how that's going to work for them here because that's a map where we just saw FaZe do some incredible shit on CT side there. And it looks like that's quietly a map they can play, even though online, yes, it's a map they've struggled on. Cobblestone, a long time ago, was a traditional Tyloo map, but, I mean, FaZe is going to ban it anyway, so you won't get to play it. It's hard to see where Tyloo can really go in this series here, and traditionally, Tyloo teams have not been good on Train. So you have to figure FaZe easily crushes that 1-2-0. Team Liquid versus Vega Squadron, right? Vega Squadron, in general, want to play Train, Inferno, Mirage. Now, of those maps... Team Liquid will play all three happily, and they're very good on Mirage, and they're pretty good on Inferno, and they can play Train. So Team Liquid, in theory, the map veto is good. Whatever Vega picks probably helps Team Liquid. But I will put in this caveat. One thing that does actually, I have respect for Vega Squadron in, is that they do seem to practice all the maps. And as such, they do actually seem to pick based on the opponent the map. Because while they want to play those three maps ideally, they're some of their best maps. They, as you saw at the minor before this last major, they are willing to pick cash against an opponent. They'll play nuke if they need to against someone. They're willing to go through the map pool to find what they think is an edge. So there are edges you can get against Team Liquid. You can go ahead and you can pick nuke or you can pick cash. These are maps that you have a very solid chance against them, and actually that generally they don't seem comfortable playing, well, at least currently. Wouldn't obviously suggest picking Cobblestone against them. I think in general, Team Liquid should do something like pick a Cobblestone, something along those lines. I think Team Liquid should win this series. Vega maybe has a shot at a map, but I think Team Liquid is just a better team in all respects. They should win, and we should have the groups. So obviously, it's tough to preview the groups without knowing which wildcard team will be in there. So what I'll do is I'll initially preview each of the 3 teams in each group. Then we'll talk about the potential wildcard group teams that could go into the groups. So first of all, in Group A, it's SK, Virtus.pro, Gambit, right? One of these 3 teams is going to get out of the group. So I'm going to go ahead and say that it's between SK and Gambit for obvious reasons. I don't think VP's shown anything to suggest that they would be able to get out. Now, when it comes to SK and Gambit, right, SK on paper, I would have said would get out of this group if they had their old lineup with Phelps. But we know they're using Bolts on loan in this team. So that makes it tricky because you never know how Bolts is going to fit into the team, what spots he's going to take. Is he just going to have to play all of Phelps' spots? They're not in any way, in my opinion, similar players in terms of style and skill set. So I don't know how that would work. I will say they did sometimes sort of force Phelps into the mold of a more, I won't say more passive player necessarily, but a little bit more passive. And generally, it did seem like a role that needed more consistency. He just had such mad skills, he could make it work earlier in the year. So I will say they could actually be even better with Bolts, which is bizarre to say. But then again, a lot of that depends on the confidence of Bolts. I mean, he obviously was playing in a lesser team before with very little pressure. Now he's playing in a team where there's massive pressure on him to perform at this tournament, especially because he hasn't technically signed for them yet. So if they do shit at this event with him, they could say, sorry, we're going to cancel this and go back with Phelps. They could absolutely do that, or get a different player. So it's certainly tricky. With that said, at the moment, I think you could still edge at SK. Now, Gambit just played recently at Alan and didn't win it. They played at the Rogue Masters EMEA qualifier and they lost to Mouse Sports in the final. Now, with that said, you look at their form recently, right? Adren is back to being pretty good, pretty damn good. MVP level numbers. Hobbit is very good again. Fitch has just been consistent the whole time he's come in and provided very solid fragging. His numbers remind me of when Hobbit first joined this team. You were like, fuck, he's doing it every tournament. This is getting legit. So they've got a solid 3-man core of firepower there. Mo has done badly the last few events. He really did drop off after the major. Like I said, that was a massive overperformance what he did at the major. This is him leveling out and having bad tournaments, and you could put it somewhere between the two, and more realistically, that's what you should expect from him. He's an all right player, but this is why before they had Fitch, I thought this is a team that lacked firepower, but actually, because Fitch has been so consistent, they've actually got more firepower now than the lineup they had with Zeus that won the major. So in theory, they could be a better team overall. Dosier's pretty average to bad. Apparently, he's the in-game leader at the moment. That's obviously got a lot of question marks around it, especially because he likes to generally, personally play such a slow style. I wonder how that'll work. But I do think being the in-game leader had made Adren's game suffer. And while they had the firepower to make it work, if Mo turned up, he's generally not going to as much against the top teams like an SK. Therefore, I kind of like the idea of at least trying Dossier as the in-game leader, because if he can do basic shit, and then people like Adren, Hobbit, and Fitch can go to work, now you've got a pretty solid team, actually. Also, the map pools look pretty good for Gambit. They have continued to stress having a deep map pool instead of just playing limited maps like they used to when Zeus first came to the team. So I certainly like that. And obviously, SK's got the stand-in, so it gives Gambit another chance as well. But I don't know. It's something about Gambit where the fact it's all best of 3 makes me think they're not going to get out of it. I think it's going to be SK ultimately. Now, Virtus.pro, apparently, this is where we should see them with Taz as the in-game leader, right? So this should be interesting. Hopefully that can revitalize him because he's been in bad form. Neo's been in terrible form, so he really needs to switch it up because he was supposed to be one of the clutch players on the team and he hasn't been for recently. Snacks obviously suffered terribly when he's the in-game leader. Pasha and Bialy, pretty good players overall. Bialy's still up and down, but overall pretty good. And Pasha actually surprisingly good sort of most of this year. So VP has some firepower. Obviously, their problem here is experience isn't that much of a factor against a team like SK, and obviously especially not if you're against FaZe. they have to almost hope that Team Liquid get in, because if FaZe gets in, it's going to make it even less likely VP could upset. The best of three nature also makes it unlikely, because VP has no map pool at the moment. They can basically only play Nuke at a world-class level. Aside from that, and by the way, SK's permaban is Nuke. Aside from that, though, you put them on the other maps that traditionally they were good on. Train, obviously Mirage, Cobblestone. They're just not really very good on any of these maps. They're in bad form generally as a team. They've got to turn things around. So I don't think they're going to do much in this tournament. Also, I have to say, I think that these are bad teams from the face in SK and Gambit, because I don't think these teams fear them in any context, actually. So I think that's also why they need to hope they get Team Liquid, because at least NA teams traditionally, to this day, still have some level of respect, and there's an intimidation factor when you play VP. So I feel like that would at least give VP a little bit of an edge, because maybe Team Liquid could beat someone else and then VP could play them. It's tough to figure out a way VP can get out here. Then you go and look at Group B. All three of these teams could get out, as I referenced before. And it all really depends if you get FaZe there. So I think that the problem here is this G2 approach, where they're not sticking with the force buying that helped them win Malmo from the quarterfinals onwards, is really, really saddening. Because here's the thing. In one sense, this is going to sound counterintuitive. In one sense, it makes G2 a little bit more dangerous, because when their firepower is on and they do these ridiculous force buys, they can break any team and in theory win any game. So the ceiling gets a little bit higher, but the consistency gets worse. And so they can also have games where it destroys them and snowballs against them faster, and where they just outright lose games and don't put AWPs in Kenny S's hand, and their best chance ultimately to win is to have AWPs all the time in Kenny S's hands. So I feel like that is really costly, and I want to see what they do in that respect if they continue to do the stupid force buys, because if they do, I don't think they're going to get out of this group. So to me, it's one of Astralis and North is getting out of this group. Now, North has been very solid recently, but you put Astralis against them, you usually will edge it to Astralis in that matchup when they play against each other. There's a mental edge for Astralis. I think map pool-wise, they can exploit a little bit more of North, because North is a little bit more obvious in what they do. North's best two maps, Cobblestone and Mirage. Well, first of all, Astralis is obviously, when they play a North, going to ban Cobblestone anyway. It's their permaban. So then North's left in a scenario where it's like, do you really want to pick Mirage into Astralis? Yeah, people have won on it recently, but that gives them a chance as well. So you're probably going to have to. So the problem for North, in my opinion, is Astralis is the better version of North, in my opinion, and then G2 has better firepower than North overall, or at least they have a much better cap to their firepower, even though North has very solid firepower. So the part of the issue here is these three teams all have good map pools. In fact, all of them, good map pools. We're talking like 5 to 6 maps each. The difference is that Astralis, if they play a G2 and a North, can exploit their map pool a bit more and get edges. North's going to play a bit more standard and new, the MSL style vetoes, which means picking maps sometimes that the opponent is strong on, which means that he'll pick potentially a Cobblestone against, or a Mirage against, well, Mirage isn't a strong map for G2, but he'll pick Cobblestone Mirage against Astralis and G2 collectively. So overall, out of those two, I would say personally, I think it will be Astralis that will get out, even though I think North's very solid. But that also depends on what the fourth team is. Because if Team Liquid comes in this group, actually I don't see them getting out of this group. These teams are all just so dangerous in their own ways. G2, perhaps slightly more firepower, much more streaky team. Astralis, better tactics than Team Liquid. North, very good tactics, good map pool, and solid firepower. So overall, the three of them combined, I could see Team Liquid not getting out of this one. I think Team Liquid has to go into Group A. If FaZe comes into this group, holy fuck. Because in that case, first of all, FaZe can beat all these teams, but I think all these teams have a shot to beat FaZe. Astralis, yes, it's going to be tough for them because the map pool's against them in the best of three, as we saw in the E-League Premier. North, I think, has a pretty decent map pool against them. They just have to be able to win on their strong maps, which happen to be strong FaZe maps. But if you can ever get a map off FaZe and get it to a third map, I think, as I said when I predicted North to beat them in the semi-finals of Premier, I think that if they can get them a third map, like a Train, I think that's where North has a shot to beat FaZe, actually, and could go ahead and do it. And I think G2 certainly can beat FaZe. It's a crazy firepower matchup. It's just, first of all, if G2's going to force buy, that's going to play into FaZe's hands and give FaZe an edge. Firepower, slightly over to FaZe's side. And to me, the AWPing's a massive deal here, because Guardian is very, very good, but I think Kenny S is a better AWPer. So I think that's an edge that you can go ahead and slant slightly over to Kenny S. So I think G2 has the crazy firepower, and by the way, a very good map pool to potentially be able to go against FaZe. So I would personally say, if in a scenario where we'll pick either setting, okay. If Team Liquid go into Group A, I actually think it will be Team Liquid and SK who gets out. I think they're the right teams to do it. I think Team Liquid's got good tactics, good consistency. Their players are good enough. I don't think they feel pressure in group stages. I think they've done it enough now and beaten the likes of SK and VP. They don't feel any fear. So I think that the Team Liquid I've seen play every day for the last 3 tournaments will get out of there. And I think it will be with SK. If Team Liquid goes into Group B, I don't think Team Liquid will actually get out. I think these teams are just too tough. There's too many edges all around. It'd be very hard to win out here. So I actually think if Team Liquid go into Group B, that it will be Astralis and FaZe, though I certainly leave an outside chance for North. But I think FaZe is pretty sure. So I think it's between Astralis and North. And I'll say Astralis overall. I think that if FaZe goes into Group A, I think that FaZe will absolutely get out of the group. And I think it will be FaZe and SK. And I think that although I would certainly love to see FaZe and Gambit play a best of 3, because Gambit has shown a very diverse map pool, actually, and has pretty solid firepower. And I would also like to see, here's the thing. If FaZe goes into Group B, wait a second, haven't I just done that? FaZe goes into Group B. Yeah, I think I just did that, right? Maybe I shouldn't do if FaZe went into Group A. Yeah. Okay, I think FaZe is definitely getting out of Group B. So, in theory, if they can win the wildcard matches, there's scenarios in which I think Team Liquid and FaZe can actually each get out of the groups. I think this is going to be a great tournament. Looks like some very sick teams. The format is primed for us to have some amazing matchups. I think this is going to be the first tournament where I think FaZe will at some point get tested because they're going to have to play all these best of 3s. They can't just win a couple of best of 1s, then go to the playoffs and then only play people in their bracket. They're going to be playing people like North, Astralis in best of 3s in the group stage. So we're going to finally see them lose maps, in my opinion. They're going to lose at least 1 or 2 maps. And I think this is where they finally get tested. It's sad that SK doesn't come with Phelps because I wanted to see the full power SK team before they break up play against FaZe, which isn't going to happen. Gambit versus FaZe could certainly be fun. That's an off-kilter matchup. VP here doesn't really have a whole lot to offer to this tournament, but I think the other 7 teams, if all the wildcard ones that we want to, the favourites get through, should be pretty stacked. And it's actually quite hard to predict who's going to get out of these groups. There aren't any obvious ones beyond FaZe, really, I think. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enter my own fantasy pool now. So here we are, esports pools. You can go to the link in the description box below to go there and enter this competition. And I'm going to go to fantasy pools. What the hell was that? Requires... it's just something else. Right, and I'm going to go to Thorin's exclusive Epicenter playoff pool, which, as it says there, is free to enter and has skins. Already has over 2,400 entries at this point in time. Now, first place is a Flip Knife Slaughter. Second place is a Gut Knife Ultraviolet. Third place is a Gut Knife Blue Steel. There's a whole bunch of knives, so first, second, third, and fourth. So some pretty good skins overall. We can see the teams that are participating here. Right, so first and foremost, when we pick our teams, you need to go ahead and remember what I've said, which is unlikely Team Liquid and it's unlikely that Vega, Squadron, and Tyloo are getting in. So no matter how cheap any of those players are, I wouldn't recommend gambling on those ones. So personally, what I'm going to do, okay, first of all, is I actually think that Team Liquid, I'm not sure how this works with the wildcard matches, but I think that they can get out of Group A. I think they're going to have a decent run here. I think they are pretty solid players. So I don't mind some of the salaries of those ones if they're not too expensive. So let's start at the top, okay? SK, it's possible they might not get out of the group. So while Coldzera nearly always has banging numbers, you probably want your big hitter, in my opinion, to be a FaZe player. And I think actually, right, here's the thing. Nico and Coldzera, if either of them make it to the final or either of them win the tournament, very good chance they're MVP, so they are worth the money here to try and be first place. But you are gambling that that'll happen. A better pick is probably to do something crazy, like, say, Guardian for only 1,900 does well because he's had a bunch of really good performances at tournaments recently and had some good stats. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, let me think, because I don't tend to pick the big banger as much, actually. But let's say that the FaZe is going to win the tournament. I think I'll go ahead and I'll pick, Olafmeister isn't worth the money there. He's had some up and down tournaments. He's getting better and better and better, but Nico's the star for me. So I'll pick Nico there. Cold, it's not certain they get out of their group. And if they do, you never know. They could just run right into FaZe in the semi-finals. Twists is very good, but I don't know personally if I want to pay that much. Like literally costs more than Rain, who obviously has had some monster tournaments recently. Dupree's been very good recently. Device is actually, he always gets numbers, but he's dropped off a little bit, and you have to know, will he get out of the group? Maybe they won't. Will he win the tournament? At the moment, doesn't necessarily look like it, although they're maybe like the third or fourth team in terms of if you're picking in. If you think Gambit's going to get out, then I think this Adren pick here is not a terrible one. It's still a little bit too close to the top ones for my liking, but you have to know that they're going to go far. But I think it's much better to take Adren than Fitchit, especially because Adren's not the in-game leader anymore. I think Fur's not a terrible pick, but it's hard to know where SK will be at with bolts. Bialy, okay, the problem is it just doesn't feel like VP can get out of the group. I definitely wouldn't pick any Vega Squadron players. Hobbit's not a bad pick there for the price, actually, if you think Gambit's going to get out. So, AZ, definitely not worth it. He's overperformed recently. I think that Valde's not bad. It's just that he doesn't put up monster numbers. Where is Config? Config's actually pretty good for the money if you think they can get out and go far, which is what's tough. Elige is not bad here. He tends to put up pretty good numbers. So I'm just going to go ahead and see if there's anyone really cheap that I think's a steal at the moment. Because JDM overall, the stats aren't going to be insane, I don't think. He tends to have good series, but not great tournaments. Definitely don't pick MSL. Fallen's not a bad outside chance, because you always know sometimes he's going to have a big tournament where he overperforms. He's obviously pretty cheap here. Stanislaus had a bunch of bad tournaments, but I think he's due for a decent one. Not a terrible pickup there. I think Pash is a pretty good one. It's just that unfortunately VP's not good enough. Again, I'm going to take Guardians. I'm going to have Guardian and Nico and say FaZe is going to do well here. Now I'm going to have to pick some cheap players here because I've picked some expensive ones. So let's see. Who do I want at this point? Maybe I should just go for someone crap. Let's have a look. I might just take JDM because I think they're going to make it. Is that a decent pickup? So I can go 2,150 now for the rest. Let's see, 2000s. Oh, Kenny S 2100. Am I picking G2 to get out though? Probably not, right? And if they do bad force buys, it limits Kenny S's viability as a player. So really, I should pick a team that I think getting out of Group B and pick some players from all Group A. Pick one of them. So I need SK, Team Liquid, Astralis, and FaZe. So you could absolutely, by the way, if FaZe is going to stomp this shit, just go ahead and pick another FaZe player. So you could go ahead and pick. I guess he's too expensive, actually, so maybe I can't. Right, so I guess I need to pick... I think I said Astralis, right? So is it really reasonable to think that? So Device, 2,300, I could do that. Yeah, and I got 2,000 for the last guy, right? So for my last guy, it's got to be... Like, here's the thing. Generally, I wouldn't... Just as a tip, I would suggest not picking, like, 4 teams, because then all 4 have to get out. So I've got 3 at the moment, so if I can, I'm going to try and find a player from one of these 3 teams. That way, the odds of my teams going further are hopefully better, and then within that, I just hope the players play well. So who else can I actually take here? I can take Nitro, but, I mean, the odds he's actually going to get good stats don't seem that reasonable, right? I could have... Let's see. I have SK getting out, so I could have... Oh, well, this shouldn't be Phelps here. I assume they will just swap bolts for Phelps here. They couldn't have known when they made the format, unfortunately, that he was going to be here. I don't think it's reasonable to necessarily pick bolts, though. It's first big tournament. I think Fallen's not bad as like a gamble on the fact that if SK go far, he can do a lot with his AWP. So what am I going to go for? Should I go Glaive or Fallen? I think that's my choices here. Glaive or Fallen. Glaive's had some pretty good performances. It's harder to know SK, but then again, Astralis is in arguably the tougher group. So I'll actually go ahead and say I'll take Fallen. So I actually like this pickup here. Funnily enough, I have got 4 AWPers. So that might seem weird. Yeah, you're probably not going to kill stats with that, but I've also got Nico, who's a fucking monster. I don't mind this team, actually. I think Nico and Guardian, very good chances to do well. Device, pretty good chances. Fallen's sort of like a gamble. He can do crazy. JDM probably not going to do as well, but I mean, we'll see how the big series go. It's all best of 3 series. So that gives him chances to recover. I'm going to go ahead and say I like that. And I'm going to say, I'm never very good at this one. I never really know what to pick here for how many seconds will pass until the first kill of the tournament has taken place. So I'm just going to go ahead and say 20. I don't know if that's too many, too little, but whatever. There we go. I've entered my own pool there at Esports Pools.
He's definitely brutal. He's always savage. And you're definitely getting wrecked.